Mr. Murali.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I applaud the government's decision to accept the recommendations of the ElderShield Review Committee to enhance the financial assistance rendered to disabled Singapore residents having long-term care needs through CareShield Life. And I also wish to add messages of congratulations to the ElderShield Review Committee for rendering a very thoughtful report. I note from the speeches made by members of Parliament before me that these recommendations have brought support from both sides of the House. In particular, two main features are noteworthy, as stated by honourable members: the payouts for life as opposed to the current 5 or 6 years under ElderShield 300 and ElderShield 400. This is welcome because medical improvements have increased and will continue to increase the lifespan of our disabled Singapore residents. The second feature is, of course, the increased payouts over time, starting from $600. Building in a mechanism to increase the payouts over time will allow the payouts to keep up with inflationary pressures. Some honourable members of Parliament have suggested that the $600 per month may not be enough. In my view, we need to look at all the other schemes that come into play. For example, the concessionary foreign domestic worker levy of $60 per month, so that the full picture of support that the government gives can be appreciated. The consequence of the enhancements have resulted in the adoption of universal coverage, so that there is risk pooling and the premiums are kept affordable. I support this approach, subject to the case made by the Honourable Member Dr. Chia Shi Lu and Chairman of Health GPC on equalizing premiums payable by males and females. And this point was echoed by several other members of Parliament. Probably the point was probably put more colourfully as well. I find it comforting, though, that MOH has categorically stated that no one would lose their CareShield life coverage due to financial difficulties. And the setup of the Elder Fund and the provision of premium subsidies is the step in the right direction. Some honourable members have asked for a requirement of 3 ADLs to be dropped to 2 ADLs, justifying it on the basis of the current low claim history and the opportunity arising from risk pooling. I understand where they're coming from. However, I read in the committee report that 1 in 2 Singaporeans may become disabled sometime in their lives. I'm therefore concerned about the impact of easing these requirements on the premiums. Would the premiums remain affordable? If not, how much more subsidy is expected from the government, and what would be the financial impact of providing more subsidies than what is currently contemplated? A clarification on these issues would be welcome. I have 3 questions. First, what is the average life expectancy of disabled residents who are able to make a claim under the current ElderShield, and how is this expected life expectancy of such residents supposed to increase or expected to increase in the coming decades? Second, how does the assessment of disability by reference to ADLs apply to mentally disabled Singapore residents? As may be recalled by members of this House, I asked MOH and MSF in this House to reconsider the application of ADL criteria with respect to the provision of concessionary FTW levy for mentally and intellectually disabled residents. MSF and MOH announced earlier this year that for such residents, they have introduced the Client Assessment Form, CAF, to assess such residents' cognitive disability. Can a similar approach be taken vis-à-vis CareShield Life, please? Ultimately, the mentally disabled and physically disabled residents are in the same boat, as they are unemployable, need to be taken care of by their caregivers, and therefore would benefit from CareShield Life. Some mental conditions can be linked to physical conditions, for example, dementia, but some are not. For example, ASD. I'm aware of several families in Bukit Batok who have severely autistic children and are concerned about their long-term care needs, and they may benefit from a more flexible approach. At the same time, I recognize that there is a need to deter the making of false claims, because such claims would in effect raise premiums. So what safeguards would be put in place to make sure that no false claims are filed and processed? My last point, Mr. Speaker, sir, is what is the status of Singapore residents who would subsequently lose their Singapore citizenship or residency? Now, in this regard, I note that the system, as promulgated, is only made workable as a result of government resources and money being spent to run the insurance system and provide premium subsidies and additional support to Singapore residents. What would be the position of Singapore residents who lose their residency or Singapore citizenship status? I see two scenarios, because the coverage under CareShield Life and cash payouts are for their entire lives. Two scenarios. One scenario is where Singapore residents who make payment of the premium, say for example they reach the age of 67 and then they don't need to make premiums anymore, and subsequently they give up their Singapore citizenship. Would they still be allowed payments under this scheme? Another scenario, which I think is less likely, is where Singapore residents receive CareShield payouts and then lose their residency and citizenship. A clarification on these points would be most welcome. That's all.